Hey everyone, before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder that the video versions of Digging for Kryptonite will end in March 2022. The podcast will continue on, but if you wish to continue being part of my Superman fan journey, which I very much hope you will, please make sure that you are subscribed to Digging for Kryptonite via your audio podcast platform of choice. We're on all major podcast platforms, so please make sure you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And again, the video podcast will continue until March 2022. All right, and now, on with the show. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 1 of the CW television series Superman and Lois is returning guest, comic book artist V Ken Marion. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, dude. I'm so excited for this. So excited to talk about Superman and Lois.
The last time you were on the show, we had an epic discussion of the underrated 90s Steel movie starring basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal.
Hell yeah.
And during that episode, and I'm on the record as saying this, I predicted, because at that point you had not yet finished watching the first season of Superman and Lois, and I predicted during that discussion that when you finished, I was going to get a text from you saying, hey, we got to do an episode on Superman and Lois. And sure enough, I got just that text not too long ago.
Yep, totally. I feel like I knew the Steel reveal was coming in the show because you had texted me some stuff, and then I just saw on Instagram too, like comments like on random people's like on like the DC, thing about like Steel being in Superman and Lois. So like I kind of put the thread together as to who it was going to be, but it was still a cool reveal when it happened.
Well, it was so funny because, as you and regular listeners know, I did a mini episode on the Superman and Lois trailer, a full episode on the pilot, and then you and I did another mini episode on the second episode of Superman and Lois. But that was it on Digging for Kryptonite as far as dedicated coverage. Yet it would often come up in conversation because I and many of the guests were watching it, as we were recording episodes last year. And every time that happened, I was always really quick to avoid spoiling anything for anyone who hadn't caught up, but for you specifically, because I knew you hadn't finished and I know you listened to the show and I was like, I don't want to spoil it for this guy. So it was for everyone's benefit, but specifically for you. So I'm so excited that you and I can now finally talk about this.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, man, I'm pumped about this. Like it was, I think it's safe to say my favorite superhero TV show right now. I mean, I think it's way better than Flash and Arrow and all that. I mean, I think Smallville, like the nostalgia factor for Smallville will still be my number one, but the show's really, really good. And like it pockets in with Smallville really nicely, I feel. Like we talked about that before, where I think if you liked Smallville, this feels like those same characters 20 years later, even though it's not canonically, but like there's like an emotional and tonal like through line between them, which is really cool.
I agree 1,000%. And that's, I have a few, I guess, sort of, global takes on the show, big picture, perspectives on it. And that's one of them. And so I'm with you 100%. Yes, it's not literally strictly a sequel to Smallville, but spiritually it very much fits in. And it's not just Smallville. I mean, the beautiful thing I think about the show is that it really mines and respects, and honors, I think, most of the Superman mythology that's come before, where, one of the episodes, deep in the first season of Superman and Lois gives us a flashback to how Lois and Clark met and fell in love and all of that. And it's like, you only get a few scenes of it. They're amazing scenes. But it's like, as someone who grew up watching Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, you can kind of like slot that in your head. Mm-hmm. Right. And kind of fill in some of the gaps there. So there's so many instances like that where, again, right, it's not strictly in canon with these other things, but spiritually, like they really all feel of a piece. It does such a great job of like weaving in so many different elements from what's come before.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, to me, I've thought a lot about this mainly because of like all the podcasts we've done together, and I think some of your longtime listeners may think that like I like dark stuff, which isn't true at all. I actually don't like dark stuff. Like I don't like when subject matter and stories are like dark. What I like is earnestness and seriousness and like taking the subject matter seriously, right? So like that just happens to co-align with the Snyderverse, which has like a darker tone, right? But like the thing that I like about the Snyder stuff isn't the darkness, it's the fact that like he takes it seriously, you know? And this show, and similar to Smallville took itself very seriously. Like it wasn't like it didn't like it never like winked at the camera and said like, hey, this is all kind of goofy, right? It's superhero. Like it didn't do that, which is what kind of what Arrow and Flash and those other CW shows kind of do. They kind of ride that line a little bit, where this show goes back to that earnest take on like, we're just going to try to take this seriously, you know? And like, and not about being beholden to reality, but believability, if that makes sense. It's this fine line for me where with stuff that like things can either get like too dark or like they get too goofy, you know, where like there's like this middle like through line where with balancing it, where like it just hits that sweet spot, and this show does it so perfectly.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I guess I can kind of piggyback off of that, and share another take that I had, because this was something that, not that it never dawned on me, but it really crystallized as I was rewatching the first season, and that is, in any story, any comic book story, but specifically any Superman story, there's always going to be, any story needs to have tension, right? And that can come in a number of forms. And when we're talking about Superman stories, there's always going to be some external tension. There's always going to be some villain he's up against, some plot, right? And some will be better than others. Some will be more interesting and compelling than others. It's always going to be a mixed bag. But for me, the stories that I enjoy the most are the ones where there's that internal tension as well, something that he's wrestling with. And again, the Smallville TV show gave us that for 10 years, but I think that's in large part why I enjoyed that show so much, because he was trying to reconcile his heritage and his upbringing and figure out where he's going. And, you know, there were some lame, Meteor Freak episodes and all sorts of stuff over the 10 years, but that core was always there, and I always enjoyed that. And exact same thing with the Snyder movies, the guy trying to figure out his place in the world. I found that so relatable. And on this show, this idea of a family man trying to balance his responsibility to the world with his responsibility to his family, it felt so real, so relatable. And, down the line a little bit, you and I are going to do an episode on the Richard Donner Superman movies, the first movie in particular. And I'll save this for mostly for when we get there, but I'll just say that I think one of the issues that I've always had, as much as I love and respect and admire the Donner Superman vision, I truly do, and I appreciate everything that it accomplished for the character. But I think one of the things that's always made it a little bit hard for me to fully get into it is I don't see as much of that internal struggle for the character in most of the movie. And so watching Superman and Lois, and I was like, just why do I love this so much? And it's just, I think, really having that tension. And look, as a young father myself, like that, seeing that family man struggle, like it really hit home. So
Yeah.
I can't say, I can't say enough good things about the show. And I'll also say this real quick. Yeah, as you know, I watched it week to week when it was airing last year. And my wife and I watched it the next day on the CW app because they had the extended cuts of episodes. So we actually didn't watch it the night it aired, but we would always watch it the next day. But there were so many interruptions. I think there were a lot of disruptions in the filming because of COVID. And then that had an impact on when the episodes aired. So they would do 2 episodes and then have a break, and then do 3 episodes and a break. It was so choppy, but I still enjoyed it. But now, over the past couple of weeks, to sit down and watch it straight through on HBO Max, 15 in a row, no commercials. What a rich and rewarding viewing experience.
Yeah.
I take it that's how you watched it as well?
Yeah, HBO. I mean, I watched the first 5 on the CW app, and but I had to do it on my computer, and I hate watching stuff on my computer now because I want to watch on my TV. And after the first 5, they came on. That's when the break happened, and they went on to HBO Max. And I told Laura, I was like, you should really watch this with me. Like, this is like a really good show. And she's like, really? Because she got burned out in the CW stuff. And she's like, she's kind of superheroed out. Like, we watch all these movies and stuff. She's like, I don't know, I want to watch this. And I'm like, no, seriously, like, it's really good. So then when it left HBO Max and came back on, I'm like, I think Steele's in this. We should really watch it. Like, and so we start from the beginning and watched it straight through. And after like the second episode, she was like, this is a really good show. Like, we definitely got to keep watching this. Like, I want to say, isn't it serendipitous that like when we were in high school, there was a show about Superman in high school, and now that we're like adults in our 30s, there's a show about Superman as an adult. I mean, obviously his kids are older than your son, and I don't have kids yet, but like it's still like it's in that same age range. That's like, it's funny how that works out.
It serendipity is the perfect word, and it's, and that doesn't happen with everything, right? I think Smallville and Superman and Lois hit both of us at exactly the right points. you know
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say for both of us as well, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman
Yeah,
came
yeah, we were like five.
years too early, right? But by the time people hear this, I'll be doing on my Patreon channel a rewatch podcast with my wife as we watch, and it's like I anticipate that I'm gonna get something very different and so much
Yeah.
more out of it now as a married man, like watching the show that was so focused on the romantic tension and the relationship. And so like that's, again, been one of the best things about doing this podcast and just exploring the Superman mythology in general, is that there's so much, and there are things that might have hit one way the first time you experienced at a certain point in time, and now you can come back to it with fresh eyes. You get something completely different out of it. It's like, I'm sure when my son, who's 2 now, when he hits his teen years, if I go back and I rewatch Superman and Lois, or if it's still on, who knows? But it's like, I'm sure, because parenting a toddler versus parenting a teenager, like, very different. So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I'm sure I would get something different out of it then. And it's a really special thing to, I think, right, to be able to go back to these
Mm-hmm.
comics or movies or TV shows, and you find something new each time. It's really cool.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, like it's funny when you brought up Lois and Clark. Like I remember when I was a kid, because we were like five when that came out, 5 or 6, and
Yeah.
at the time I remember thinking like, why is he only Superman for like 5 minutes? Because he only like he would be Superman at the end of the show for like 5 minutes, and then like I rewatched that whole series. I don't know, back in like 2014 or something, when I had was recovering from a shoulder injury, and like I was like, this is a pretty good show. Like it was like emotionally gripping and stuff. It ends really weird. Just heads up, like it ends like abruptly and gets kind of like goofy at the end. But like the first 2 seasons are pretty solid.
Oh, I remember. I mean, I watched it as a kid, at least some of it when it was first airing. But like you said, I mean, I was so little. But then a few years later, when I was in probably towards the end of elementary school, it was airing in reruns on TNT. And at
Mm,
that point, I rewatched basically the entire series. So it's, I wouldn't say it's fresh in my mind, but the broad strokes are. But I'm
yeah.
I'm excited to get into that, and of course watching Superman and Lois, of course
Hmm.
calls the Lois and Clark show to mind, and even in the pilot, in that opening montage when we see Superman fly Lois up, through the clouds,
Hmm.
it's very very evocative of that moment from Lois and Clark. So you
Yeah.
see a lot of things uh, like that. Now, when you texted me, you said you had a lot of thoughts,
Yeah.
and as do I. But man, I just want to throw this to you first. Where would you like to begin as we talk about the first
Well,
season of Superman and Lois?
okay. Well, before I forget about this, let's start with Superman himself, with Tyler Hoechlin. Like he's friggin' awesome as Superman, and I think he. I mean, Christopher Reeve is my favorite. He'll always be my favorite as Superman, and Tom Welling will always be my favorite Clark Kent. But I think Tyler Hoechlin might be my favorite, like total of the two of them together, because, like, okay, so you know that like the duality of Clark Kent and Superman, like the idea that Superman, like in the Reeve, I think we texted about this, but I thought this was genius how they did this in the show. Is that when they in the Christopher Reeve movies, Clark puts on the glasses as a disguise and starts like bumbling around and like knocking stuff over, right? And then in like the Dean Cain and the Henry Cavill versions, there's not that much of a difference, just like the glasses kind of thing. But like the idea of Clark being like this like kind of dorky, goofy guy, and Superman being like stoic, like altruistic, like superhero. I like it where like he puts on the disguise to be like this goofy guy. I love how in this show the take is Clark is genuinely who he is, a dorky, goofy dude. And when he becomes Superman, he pretends to be stoic and cool. Like I thought that was such a good way to do it, because like it's like that makes him so much more relatable and likable too. Like it makes him feel like all of us, like dorks. We all feel like dorks, and like the way that he portrays it, he's like doing funny dad jokes, and like just like he's got so much more like emotional delivery. Like there was this one scene where something happens with like Lois and Clark are in their kitchen and they're like scolding their kids for like getting in trouble for something, like driving a truck, or they did something that really got in trouble, and they're like sending the kids to the room, and then Lois turns to him and goes, well, on other news, I got attacked by a Kryptonian, and then Clark goes like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, this like, oh, like, and it was just like, oh my god, it's like I've never seen like a Superman take like that, where like, and just like it was stuff like that peppered out throughout the show, where I'm like, he seems like a real person, like this, but not like he seems like a real guy who's like kind of dorky, and then when he becomes Superman, he like pretends to be like some Superman, you know? Like I think that's like a very smart take on it.
I am so with you on this. And when you texted me that about how the dorkiness is genuine and it's the persona that he puts on as Superman, I was like, yeah, I mean, that is completely right. And the scene you pointed out is a perfect example. The one that really jumped out to me is the Harvest Festival episode where he's with the family out in the field and he's like describing all the stuff that they have. And
Yeah.
he's like, oh, they've like chocolate covered, bacon, right?
Yeah.
Like chocolate covered bacon. And he's genuinely excited.
Psyched. He's psyched out. Yeah. And then when it cuts to the Harvest Fest and he like eats, he's like oh, so good. Like he's like, it's this kind of like this goofy kind of like affectation they had. I thought worked so well for it, you know?
Yeah, it really was perfect. And, you know, again, we mentioned Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman. And, you know, like I said, as of this recording, I haven't started the rewatch yet, but by the time people hear this, I will have. But, you know, my memory of it is they really leaned into, you know, Clark as really a regular guy. And I wonder, and my view might change once I start rewatching it, but my memory of it is, you know, maybe as much as I like a human relatable Clark, there is this otherworldly aspect to him. And I feel like in Lois and Clark, it might have leaned a little bit too much into like, he's just like a regular guy who, you know, hangs out and plays basketball. But I feel like this show strikes a beautiful balance. And certainly as far as the Clark portions, yeah, he is a real person. I mean, look, you and I love Smallville endlessly. And I love Tom Welling as Clark, and I love his but you know, his was a pretty like stoic Clark, especially as the series went on.
Well, his was like the opposite. His was actually like averse to being dorky. He was like comic books. You read comic books, like he would always make these like comments like that. Like it was like almost the polar opposite of what Tyler Hoechlin. Like, you imagine Tyler Hoechlin's version of Superman having tons of comic books and just like eating like ice cream and like watching cartoons. You know, like it's just like that version of, I just think it's very like it's modern, but like it does that thing so well where it makes it modern and real and believable, but harkens to the classic like imagery of what we think of as Superman, right? So like the idea of like the dorky Clark Kent and the stoic Superman, but like doing it in like a modern, relatable way, you know?
Yeah,
and
no.
I think, I was gonna say, I think it is so relatable because I mentioned before, like every like all of us, like we feel like dorks, right? And so like when we go out in the world, we try to like put on this persona of being like cooler than we are, you know? So like, I think it hits on so many levels that I think it was, I honestly don't even know if they were conscious of doing it. I think like, it was just really well done, you know?
It works. I mean, it works so beautifully. I mean, another scene that comes to mind is when he takes the volunteer job as the assistant coach, and you know he's coming out with the jacket and hat, and he's so excited about it. And it's like, yeah, no, I really think he is excited about the jacket and the hat.
Oh yeah. Dude, I love that in that same episode. He's like carrying the water, right? I thought this was this interaction was so great. He's like carrying like this heavy jug of water and he's like really struggling with it. And his one son, Jordan, is talking to Sarah, one of the girls in his school. And like Sarah turns and goes, I think your dad needs help. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then like, and Clark like comes, he's like, oh, and he drops. He's like, hey, Sarah. And like, and they have this little interaction. She walks away. And then his son's like, okay, now pretend you need my help carrying this. Like his son was like that like interaction that was so funny. Like that line of dialogue from his kid, be like, okay, now pretend you need my help with this. You know, like it was good.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I enjoyed the first time, but especially rewatching it, it just, he really does feel like a person, like a fully formed, you know, fully rounded person in a way that you don't often see. I mean, I really don't think we've ever gotten a version quite like this.
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. And it's like, I appreciated it so much. And I'll also say, again, as the artist, we always talk about the visuals. I really like the scruff. It's not too much, but it's there.
Okay, so
I like the
that
scruff.
that's the one thing that bothers me, because every time he's in the Superman suit, I'm like, as Clark, I don't mind it, but in the Superman suit, like Laura and I were always like, he kind of needs to shave, doesn't he? Like, because like in the suit, it was bothersome to me a little bit, but like as Clark Kent, I had no problem with it. I
Mm.
actually think that would have been a nice, because I think he looks no different at all between being Clark and Superman. Like, it's like the fact that like Lana doesn't know it is like astoundingly like weird, but like that might have been a nice visual thing. Like if when Superman's just magically super clean shaven, and then as Clark Kent he's not, because like they don't change his hair, they don't change anything. He just like is straight up the same guy. So it's like when when Superman's on TV and on the football squad is all watching TV, like none of them are like, dude, is your dad Superman? Like, it's like, is Coach Superman? Like,
Yeah, no, for sure. I said this when we talked about Superman and Lois before, so I won't belabor the point because I have addressed this, but I just, in terms of Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch as Lois, and just this incarnation of Superman generally, when they appeared in their original incarnations in the Arrowverse before Crisis on Infinite Earths as supporting characters on Supergirl, was not that taken, honestly, with either one of them. And in retrospect, I think that, they served a different function on those shows. I mean, they were truly supporting characters, and especially that version of Clark and Superman. I mean, he was there to not overshadow Supergirl, right? And I think with that in mind, what they did was fine, but it didn't necessarily make me excited for this show. And on top of that, like yourself, I mean, I really had gotten so burnt out on the Arrowverse. I mean, right now, this is the only show that I'm watching, and honestly, I don't consider it part of the Arrowverse. And I say that as a huge compliment. I mean, with the exception of that random John Diggle cameo towards the end of the season, it's like it's completely on its own, which I love.
I was actually going to bring that up because I love John Diggle as a character. I kind of wish they didn't do that, because I think it would have been cool if they brought in those heroes like Arrow or Flash or whoever, but they were different actors. Like, I mean, like a completely different universe and have like a different take. Like, I thought it'd be so cool to bring in like the Flash, but he's like a completely different Flash, and you could just do like a whole new grounded, serious take that like fits in with the show. Like, I kind of wish they did that. Who knows? Maybe they still will. But but the Diggle thing, it kind of reminded me like, oh yeah, this is part of the thing that like I don't really like that much. Even though I like John Diggle so much as a character, just the tone of those other shows is like, yeah.
No, that's the thing. I mean, there's, and we know what's kind of crazy though is Todd Helbig, the showrunner of Superman and Lois, was previously the showrunner of Flash, and there's a lot of people who have worked on both shows. So it's not like, oh, it's a completely different pool of creators working on this. It's a lot of the same people.
I didn't know that. Wow.
But there's such a level of sophistication from the way the show is shot and presented to the quality of storytelling, and really a focus on the human side and the people that you do not get in the other Arrowverse shows. I mean, that's really its own conversation that I don't think I would ever do a podcast on, because it wouldn't be enjoyable. But I think that, one of the things that really, really kind of turned me off to the Arrowverse shows is virtually all of them, became these superhero teams, right? Like
squad,
the squad, right? And I just felt like it lost the human element. And what I love so much about this on Superman and Lois, I love seeing the kids at the diner. I love the marital issues between the Cushings. Like, I love Chrissy Beppo trying to keep the Smallville Gazette afloat. It's like, I love all that stuff. And I just feel like they struck a wonderful balance between that and, Superman's long lost brother from Krypton trying to, take over the world. Like, you still have that. But I feel like they've done such a great job. I mean, Miles, I mean, I hate to say it, but like Miles better than anything else on the Arrowverse. So
totally.
I really, really, really hope that it stays in its own pocket. I mean, had it not been for COVID, the original plan was for there to be a crossover last season between Superman and Lois and Batwoman.
See, that would have ruined the show, because it's like those other CW shows have this tone where I mean, granted, I haven't watched Batwoman, so I don't know if this is part of Batwoman or not. But all those other CW shows have like the command center with the comm in their ear, and there's like a character who makes quippy pop culture references, and like they always do these like camera reveals where like the hero turns and like the camera zooms in, and they're like, huh, now I made it, or something, like some corny line. Like they just have this formula that I personally don't vibe with anymore. And I don't think it vibes with what has been presented in Superman and Lois. So I really hope they do just keep it its own thing and like not like spread it too thin and go crossover heavy. Like I really don't want to see Green Arrow like Stephen Amell in this. I don't want to see like like Grant Gustin in it or Batwoman or any of them, just because like I just think it just doesn't like match. It'd be like trying to like ram like a tonally different thing into it.
I 98% agree with that. I will say this. I feel like, so I definitely don't ever need a crossover, like a full on crossover where it's like part 1 on Superman and Lois and part 2 on Flash. Don't need that. Don't want that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to me, I guess, to see Melissa Benoist's Supergirl, her Kara more specifically. I don't need her as Supergirl, and to see Grant Gustin's Barry kind of like through the lens of Superman and Lois, to kind of, obviously it would still be in continuity and everything, but to sort of take like that more grounded, more human approach to the character and see them interact with Clark like in that capacity. I wouldn't mind that, but I don't know that
I would agree with you if they use different actors. Like,
okay.
Because no, and I only say this because like those like Melissa Benoist and Grant Gustin have been doing it for so long that I feel like it wouldn't be going through the lens of Superman and Lois. It would be taking the flavor of those shows and putting it in. Like I would love to see Supergirl on this show, but like I would want a new Supergirl, and I would love to see Flash, but I would want a new Flash. Also because like in those shows, like Superman didn't exist, so it was like I know it's the crisis thing that like meshed them all together, but like I feel like that's a good excuse to just make a clean break, and I don't know. This is just my own nerdiness coming out here.
No, I get it. And and not to nitpick or get too nerdy about this, but plot wise, I think, when you see how this first season of Superman and Lois unfolded, I mean, there were a couple of really critical moments where if this show existed in the same universe as Supergirl, Kara would have come in real handy. It's like when Tal-Rho takes him and they can't find Clark anywhere. It's like, gee, if only there were a cousin they could call. So it's like, that's the thing. There was a little part of me that's like, well, technically it's part of the Arrowverse. Why don't they have any kind of mention? But it's like, it works perfectly fine on its own. I really hope it stays that way. I mean, on the bright side, Supergirl's already ended. Flash, I really feel like is on its last leg. So I don't know how much longer there will even be these other Arrowverse shows to potentially cross over with. So my hope is that this can really just stay its own thing, because it's something special. It really, really is. One, I know I said it's some, big picture, impressions of the show. And one of them that I really want to make sure I get out is a lot of times when you watch, any show, but especially superhero shows, I feel, and even going back to our beloved Smallville, sometimes there are characters who, kind of grate on you, or you find their motivations or their decisions kind of infuriating. And on this show, and I'm very curious to compare notes, you might feel differently, but I really felt like everyone had a very valid point of view and perspective, and it made it really interesting. Like when Sam Lane is stockpiling kryptonite weapons, you get why a general who's tasked with protecting the public would have that, yet at the same time, as from the perspective of the daughter and the son-in-law, you get why they would be upset. Like, you kind of see both sides of it. And, John Henry, and there's so much we'll talk about with John Henry Irons, but the other big example, and I know you have thoughts on this character, to me, the unsung hero of this first season is Kyle Cushing and his portrayer, Eric Valdez. Before I give my piece on it, what were your thoughts on Kyle?
Well, I was just gonna say that guy he's like perfectly cast. Like I feel like I know that dude in like my hometown. You know what I mean? Like everything about him, like the way his accent, like just how he dresses, how he looks, his manners, like everything about him is like he doesn't feel like a CW like like stud actor that they try to like rough up to be like on like a CW show. He feels like a real dude from like Midwest town. You know what I mean? And like it's just like and like his whole motivation like he wasn't wrong for any of it. Like he was just literally trying to bring jobs back to his town, and then everybody turns on him, and it's like, well, you guys didn't know any better. Like, you know what I mean? Like from like you're right. Everyone's point of view that they're doing the right thing, and I thought that was really interesting. Like he wasn't Whitney, right? He wasn't like the shithead that you're like, oh, kick his ass, Clark. Like he wasn't that character at all. So he was a great character.
And and this is where I really have to tip my hat to the portrayer and to the writers. Clearly they had a plan for him. But from the pilot, right? Unless Lana were married to like Pete Ross, and I think it's interesting, right? They could have paired her up with him, and there's precedent for that in the comics. But they went with this original character, right, of Kyle Cushing, and from that pilot, he's drinking beers at the funeral, and he's giving Lois a hard time in the kitchen about Morgan Edge. And, very early on, you know that there's tension in the marriage there. And as people who have consumed a lot of Superman content, I think we immediately think of Whitney, right? Like a romantic partner of Lana who's not a good fit for her, who's not really a great guy. So I feel like this guy was starting like at a deficit as far as the audience is concerned, right? And it could have been a really like thankless role. But I just, especially on rewatch, it's like, yeah, he really thought he was doing a good job. And it's funny, my wife and I talked about this because when they had that town hall meeting, when they're deciding whether or not to give Morgan Edge the mining rights, Lois makes this big thing about how you went to this other town and you promised all these jobs and you only generated half of them. Yeah. And I remember saying to Steph, I was like, I don't know, like if I were in a small town and we were really hurting and we didn't have any jobs, half is better than nothing. So it's like from Kyle's perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it definitely tracked like and yes, there is that point where, he is disappointed where Lana gets the job instead of him and, initially, but it's like for the most part, like he really, he's got a good job, right? Like he's the fire chief. Like he's okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's a heroic job that he's got. He's not like, I don't know, like some guy who's like Ponzi scheming the town or something, He's like a solid guy. Like, yeah, is he perfect? No, I mean, he's obviously him and Lana have problems, but like he's not like Whitney shithead, you know what I mean? Like, which they easily could have made him. They could have made him like this like raging drunk that's throwing beer bottles against the wall and everything. Like, I mean, they make him a little bit of an alcoholic, but not like he's not like violent, he's not like smacking people around or anything, which like they easily could have done, that easily could have been a direction they went. So I'm glad they didn't. Like he was a very well cast, as was Sloane.
Oh yes.
Emmanuel Shrieky as a Lana. She was great. She was one of my favorite parts of the show.
So you and I are fellow Entourage fans, and of course she played Sloane, E's love interest on that show, and I love her on this. I mean, I don't think there is any Superman project in any medium that has done better by the character of Lana Lang than this show.
Mm-hmm, totally.
And initially it was a little shaky, right? Because again, in that pilot, you don't, Kyle does not make the best first impression. He grows on you over the course of the season. And, in the finale, he runs into the burning building to save, one of the townspeople, these same townspeople who turned on the family. So, again, he really shows his heroism. But again, in that pilot, it's like, oh man, like, is this going to be another Whitney situation where Lana's with someone she really needs to get away from? And I was so thankful that they didn't saddle her with that kind of husband. I was so glad that they didn't have her pining for Clark. And and I
because that could have been a thing where like Clark like strays from Lois to like go to like. I'm so glad they didn't do that, because that would have been like just flying in the face of like everything these characters like stand for. So like I'm so glad they didn't do that.
Well, listen, when they announced this show and that it was going to be set in Smallville and Lana Lang was going to be a part of it, that was my fear. I was like, and look, in fairness to both of us, we were conditioned by many years of Smallville to expect that sort of thing. It's like Lana's in the picture. Of course, Clark's going to be hung up on her. So, I was worried. And it was so refreshing. And I loved, and we didn't get enough of them. I hope there's more in season 2. I love the scenes between Clark and Lana. Like, I love their little banter. They have that little bit that they do where it's like, oh, I met my best friend in Smallville. It's like, oh, that's nice. Like that whole little shtick that they do. And it was a genuine friendship. And it's the sort of thing that it really, I love Smallville. I feel like I'm saying this a lot. Like I have a lot, like watching this, of course, brought Smallville to mind a lot. And in a lot of instances, I don't want to say made me think less of Smallville, but it just pointed out some things that I wish Smallville had achieved. And one of them is that I wish Clark and Lana on the Smallville show had gotten to a point of true, genuine friendship. Right? Because I think that was something that needed to happen on that show, and it really didn't. It's like when Lana leaves because she's radiating kryptonite. Their last scene together is Clark on the barn floor crying out for her as she walks away. And it's like, oh man, like you wanted them to get to a point where it's like they could be friends and part, and then, he moves on with Lois. Not that he literally can't be in the same physical space with Lana, but hey, Lois is there. So like, it was so refreshing. And the final thing I want to say about Lana is this was clearer to me in the rewatch because you had them all in a row. In the early episodes, she's very concerned about the perception that the townspeople have of her, right? She doesn't want to go into the therapy, the doctor's waiting room where her daughter is having a therapy session because someone might see her, right? She's very concerned about that. And then in one of the final episodes, she tells off the mayor, like in the middle of town. It's like she really has a nice arc over the course of the season. Man, I love how they handled her, and I agree. She was terrific.
Oh, she was so perfectly cast. That actress Emmanuelle Shrieky does not work enough because she's great. She's beautiful. She's awesome. She brings so much emotional weight to it, right? Like even on Entourage, which is a show that's like a comedy show, but she brought like a real like weight and like realism to that relationship on that show. So like, yeah, and her scenes with Lois too, they easily could have gone to this thing where they're like frenemy rivals, like like kind of like undercutting each other, but they didn't. They made them like genuine friends, and like it was very refreshing to have a show like that where like there's still tension, but everyone still likes each other. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like the typical show tropes of like you know what I'm talking about. The typical like especially CW like tropes of like creating character conflict. They did it in a very real way. Like it felt very like true and like earnest.
Yeah, the episode where Lana and Lois go out drinking together. I'm like, this is the scene we always needed. It was so good. And you hit the nail on the head that even when there's tension, they're not at each other's throats, right? So like going back to Kyle, I think it's the second episode where they have the barbecue, right? And again, there's tension between, Lois and Kyle. He still gives her a plate of ribs. It's like, they don't see eye to eye on this, but there's still civility between them.
That scene in the barbecue is like, that was what made me like 100% Kyle's side when like Clark and Lois look out the window and they see Kyle grilling and like you hear them talking, like you don't hear what's going on outside. And Kyle, you see Kyle, he's got his sunglasses on the back of his head, like backwards, and he's like playing air guitar with the spatula. It's just like, I'm like, I know this dude. Like, so good.
One thing that, and I don't know that either of us, I know I don't have an answer to this, but there was more diversity in this Smallville than I think we've seen in any other incarnation, and than you might expect for a small Kansas town. And I don't know the demographics of like a small Kansas town, so I don't know if this was, kind of like just a creative choice that they made, or if it is actually reflective of what we're seeing in places like that. I don't know, but it was interesting, and I definitely clocked that. I was like, oh, we're really, it's not this homogenous, white, town. There was really a lot of diversity there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that they did that because I feel like that reflects more like reality. You know what I mean? Like it's for sure good. Like and all their friends, like all the football players and everything. Like you're right. It was a lot of diversity on the show, which was a good thing. Which is awesome.
Yeah. And talking about Lana, there's a scene with her and her daughter, really early in one of the early episodes where, obviously there's been this this tension between them, and the daughter's talking about how basically sees that her mom's not happy, right, and she feels that she herself is kind of like going to follow in a similar on a similar path. And I just remember watching that scene, and I'm like, that's again for a CW show. It's like it's pretty sophisticated, as far as the like these emotional issues that they're dealing with. It was again, I just can't say enough great things. I really
it
time
felt
and again
like
was
Friday.
really impressed.
It felt a lot like Friday Night Lights. I know we've talked about that before, but it had that like weight of that show. It was great, dude. It was every like I don't think there was one person I thought was like kind of questionable, like cast wise, but like that was Morgan Edge. Like, but I think that might have been more like writing. We can get to. I think that's the weakest part of the show, by the way, is the Morgan Edge stuff. But yeah, everyone was just cast so well, and they acted their parts so well. And like you said, like with the representation for with all the diverse characters and stuff, it just felt real and like modern and like earnest and good, and like I don't know, I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, I think that's the theme of our of our episode here. But it was, I think the thing why I'm like so like dumbfounded by it in certain respects is just that I didn't expect this of the show.
Well, dude, just the premise. Superman has 2 teenage kids and he's like raising them. Like that sounds like god awful. Like I remember when the show when we first talked about it and you said you were going to do a podcast and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to watch. This sounds like really bad. Like a CW Arrowverse show about Superman raising teenagers. Like, oh, like no, but I'm telling, it's like they knocked it out of the park. Oh, and I want to go back to the first because I re-listened to our first episode talking about this, and I was saying how I thought the costume, the Golden Age costume, was really bad looking, and I maintain that in that first 5-minute clip of the show, I think this is because it's this info dump. I think it's like comes off as a little corny, but seeing the episode where he's in the Golden Age costume the whole time, the whole flashback episode, I really like the Golden Age costume. I don't like the underwear, and I don't like that the S is like looks like it's stitched on, like it looks like visibly like not like attached to right, like it looks like it's kind of like taped on. But I love the colors of it. Like I love like the blue and the red with the black behind the yellow. Like I think the Golden Age color costume I like a lot, and I really really like I wish that blue was the blue in his like modern day suit because the modern day blue is a little too dark. But yeah, I've been totally turned around in the Golden Age look for him. So
nice.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I'm glad. I dug that. Would I want that necessarily to be the costume every week? Probably not, but I liked it in the capacity, in which they used it. Let me ask you this, because I feel in a lot of ways I wear my heart on my sleeve when we do these episodes, and I've often talked about things that have made me emotional in the everything that we've talked about on these various episodes, and I'm curious if you want to answer. Was there anything that kind of got you choked up at all over the course of the? And it's okay if not. Was there anything that like you really found like you were really moved by?
There definitely was, and I think it was the part with Steel when he's with his daughter, and he like they do their like they're like holding hands, and she says like forged in iron, and he says like strong as steel or something to that effect. Where like he calls out the name Steel, and you can tell it's like it's basically him saying like I'm not giving up, and like that choked me up a little bit. Like you know what I mean? Even talking about it now is kind of like making me a little emotional. Like that hit home really hard for me. Trying to think. I know there's definitely other parts of the show but that's the one that jumps to mind the most. I mean, Steel in general to me was the best part of the whole show. Like, because I'm a huge fan of him, and the actor was great. Like, I mean, he's not Shaq. I mean, which and I say that genuinely. Like, I still think Shaq is like perfect to play Steel, but yeah, he was great. I thought they missed a golden opportunity at the end when they teamed up for the last fight. I wish Superman gave him like a spare cape. He's like, I'm deputizing you as like another Superman. Like, I wish he gave him another cape. Like, I gave him a cape because like that suit was missing a cape for sure.
Yeah, I mean, So first of all, I agree with you. That scene definitely was moving to me. Honestly, I kind of toyed with framing our discussion around the moments that made me tear up because there were a lot. There really were, and I won't go through all of them. But unsurprisingly, like a lot of the moments that dealt with the fathers and sons, really moved me. But random stuff, not random stuff, but unexpected things I found moving, like when Jordan can't control the heat vision on the football field, and Clark
Mhm.
races out there and he puts his hand in front of his face. He's like, just let it out. I got it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
That's
mean,
good.
I'm not saying like I was bawling, but it it was moving to me. It's like that he was there for him in that way, and I really like that. A lot of the stuff with Steel, I think I mentioned this on another episode, but in the finale when he's out in space and his oxygen levels have been depleted, but he was able to throw the hammer with the velocity he needed to stop Morgan Edge, and you know he's floating out there, and you see on his face and you see the tear coming down, and we see his memories of his daughter, and it's like this guy doesn't think he's coming back, and he's okay with that because he thinks
Hmm.
he's going to pass on and see his daughter. And and then of course Clark gets him, but it was such a moving moment. And then there are a lot of scenes where not necessarily moving, but really kind of like heart wrenching, where the kids are hard on Clark at various points in this,
Yeah,
especially in the early episodes. And yeah, you really feel like that struggle of again, like this is the powers of a god, yet he is struggling to try to connect with his kids, including one who is
hmm,
dealing with powers of his own. So, all of that stuff really resonated. And I know I said fathers and sons, but the episode where Lana allows Laura to possess her, right? Because they need to
hmm,
figure out how to reprogram the Eradicator. And we get that scene with Laura and Clark. Um, and a lot of it is sort of the technical piece of how they're going to reprogram it. But he tells her about Martha. He's like, I
hmm.
had a mother here. Her name was Martha. She loved me very much. And obviously he had just lost her, and just him conveying that to Laura, and just seeing the joy and the relief right in her eyes was it really got me. And the last thing, because I could go on, but the last thing is also with Laura when Lois has the conversation with her. And she talks about how, Clark is the world's, first and greatest hero. But she's like, but I just want you to know, like, he's an even better man. He's a better husband and father.
Hmm.
And how much that means to, like, oh man, all that stuff. I loved it. I got chills as I'm
Yeah,
as I'm
yeah,
quoting this
dude.
stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean it wasn't with Superman, but the scene where Jordan they go back to their old high school and they play the football game and afterwards they get into like a fight with their old teammates and Jordan goes to like throw a punch and his brother is like no you can't and like he goes to try to stop him and like grabs his fist and kind of like takes the brunt of all of it and like breaks his hand and like his life's probably irrevocably changed now because like they said that he's in a cast for the rest of the show. It's not like he's just like next season he's like, oh, I'm better now, like so. Um, yeah, like that. Like I like that they made the brothers not at each other's throats either. That's going back to that, but a lot of moments between the brothers kind of got me like choked up a little bit because like I'm an only child and I always wanted a brother. So like a lot of that is like kind of hits that like, oh man, this would have been awesome if I had a brother like that, like so yeah.
Yeah. Well, we must have talked about this at some point, but I too am an only child. I can't say I ever like longed for a sibling, but watching the show and seeing that dynamic, I too found that so refreshing because I think it would have been really, and it's not without, they have their moments, but
Hmm.
at the end of the day, like they're a family, the four of them. And, even little things like when the kids leave for school, they tell their mom and dad they love them, like little things like that. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
feel like you often see on teen shows
you
or a lot
don't
of shows. And it's like at the
know.
end of the day, no matter what problems they have, it's like they're good boys. Like they're
Yeah.
good boys. They love their parents. Their parents are there for them.
I mean, I thought after the first episode, I was like, "Oh, I see where this is going. Jordan's gonna get powers, and Jonathan is gonna fall into a vat of acid, lose his hair, and become the next Lex Luthor." Like, I felt like that's like this is clearly what they're doing, but they didn't do that at all. It was like the show kept surprising me in that it kept sidestepping all the tropes that you think it would go for, and the fact that Jordan talk about things that, like get teared up when when Jonathan has that breakdown in one episode where he's like it's to the effect of like, I can't do anything. I can't even help Dad hold nails to like bang in this for like, what am I gonna do? And like he kind of like forms this like friendship with Steel, like because he like is interested in like the tech stuff, and he sees in Steel like, oh, this is a dude that doesn't have powers that's still like contributing and like doing something, and like maybe I could do the same thing, and like I think that was a pretty cool aspect to add to the dynamic.
Oh, man, I'm enjoying that. I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying finally being able to talk to you about all of this. I love that. I love the bond with Steel. I love the bond that he formed with his mother over being the two powerless people in the family. And like, that's the thing that one of the things that I think the show did so well, in addition to giving everyone a valid point of view, like you get where everyone is coming from. And I think the motivations really ring true, but everyone has their moments of heroism and everyone has their role to play. It's not just Superman. Like, that's the thing about this show, whether it's Kyle running into that burning building to save, one of the people who had turned on him. Or, again, Jonathan, not just helping Steel with the weapons, but, I think it's the 1-2 punch of, Lois revealing Clark's secret to John Henry Irons, right? When Clark's been taken and potentially turned, by Morgan Edge. And, John Henry Irons is ready to take Kal-El out, right? And Lois makes this plea and is like, listen, it's not this is my husband. And, it seems to resonate, but at the end of that scene, he's like, listen, I still need to do this. But then Jonathan makes his plea, as the child. He's like, look, I get the sense, it seems like you're a good dad. You love your daughter. Like, my dad's a great dad too. And so it's like they all have their moments throughout.
That part made me tear up. By the way, talking about parts that I guess I'm not remembering them, but that you jog my memory. That part when he's like, "Mike, my dad's a really great dad too." Like, yeah, that was for sure, a good moment.
Yeah, and all right, so we obviously mentioned John Henry Irons, but like let's get into this. Here, so much to say, but. When the show started, right, we knew that there was going to be this character, the Stranger, right? And of course he debuts in the pilot, only in armor. We see only the back of his head at the very end. And the AI in his ship refers to him as Captain Luther, right? And then we get to see more of him in the subsequent episodes, and he poses as a reporter named Marcus Bridgewater, and you don't know his deal.
Yeah.
It was so brilliant.
I think everybody assumed it was Lex Luthor because he was bald. Like that was the thing, is like, and that was a genius like way to reveal it. It was good.
Well, that's the thing, because watching it, it's like, typically Lex Luthor is not a black man, right? So when we get this reveal, it's like, oh, like we're getting, like they're changing up the way Lex is going to be presented. Like, and I think that was the kind of like the stroke of genius, because it's like oh, like this is the twist sort of thing,
Yeah.
And it's like, it wasn't even in my mind, like, oh, he might really be John Henry. Like, but I think that's ultimately a positive thing. It's not like I felt like, well, he's a black man, he can only be John Henry Irons. It's like, I was on board. Like, that's the thing about the show. I was like, oh, I can't, like, this is a really badass Lex Luthor. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Because like it was like up until the reveal, it's like they show clips of his flashback, like on the other Earth in the military, like married to Lois, and you're like, oh, well, this must be the heroic Lex Luthor. You know what I mean? Like that's like, oh, this is a badass Lex Luthor. Yeah. And then when they do that reveal, like his name is John Henry Irons, sir. And then like they say like his DNA matches a deceased man named John Henry Irons. And then it cuts right to like Superman getting beat up in the red rays, and he's like, "You're not the Man of Steel, I am." And he clicks the thing on his glove, and the hammer comes flying out, which we hadn't seen up to that point. Like we hadn't seen the hammer at all. It comes flying out, and he grabs it. Like, oh, dude, so chills. That was a chills moment for sure.
Well, you and I, when we talked about the Steel movie, and you and I are defenders of it and will remain defenders of it. But yeah, we talked about how, generally speaking, this is a character with untapped potential.
Yeah.
But I feel like this show now is realizing that potential, and they're doing such a great job. Like,
yeah, totally.
What's funny is, you and I talked about, because we talked about the Steel movie, but also about the comics. And obviously I did the run of episodes where we looked at Reign of the Supermen. And, what was always cool about John Henry Irons is that we talk about Superman as this inspiration. And John Henry Irons is that inspiration made real. Like, this is a person who was so moved by what Superman did for him and for other people that he decided to do it for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beautiful. This obviously flips it, because in Superman and Lois, he's still motivated and inspired by Superman, but in a very different way, to kill him.
Yeah.
But it's like, over the course of the season, you know, you see that respect start to grow, and they come to that understanding, and maybe not buddies by the end, but I think we're getting there, like the allies at a minimum. And it was, again, you talk about the arcs of the season, you know, like from Lana in the car, ashamed to go into her daughter's therapy appointment, to telling off the mayor in the town square, you know, to go from the stranger in the pilot who only wanted to kill Kal-El to an ally, you know, of Clark, you know, by the end was, oh God, I loved it.
It was good, dude. Yeah. My only thing, like we said, was that, like, I wish he had a cape. I wish he had the cape. And like the helmet, I do wish that, like, I hope they change the helmet for the next season, like, so they make it more steel, like more like look like a human face, and not just like that. Like, he kind of looks like the Master Chief from Halo is kind of what this helmet looks like now. I do wish his hammer was bigger too. You know, I mean, we're like, I'm like visually nitpicking the shit out of him now, but like, because it was so well done. Like, his portrayal was so great. Do you know the actor's name? Because I forgot to look him up. Because he was awesome.
Wole Parks.
Yeah, he was great. Great job, dude. Like, it was amazing. Like, such a good steal.
I messaged him on Instagram. I said, I really loved your performance. By the way, if you ever want to come on the podcast, I don't expect to get a response, but if nothing else, just to convey. And I actually wrote in my message, I was like, you know, basically what I just said, like, I've long felt this was a character with a lot of potential. And it's like, I love what you and the show are doing with the character of John Henry Irons. And again, it's just a very understandable, believable, relatable motivation. It's like, he's seen what a Superman unhinged can do to a world. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, this is his second chance to stop that from happening. Now, I actually thought that Superman and Lois did a solid job with this alternate Earth business, because I feel like, and I know you've dropped out of the other Arrowverse shows, as I have, but I know I watched more than you did. I feel like on some of the other shows, like, the characters were weird about their doppelgangers. It's like, it's not you. I really feel like there was like this weird thing on a lot of the shows where it's like, I don't know. I don't think there was like they fully grasped, or at least the way it played out on screen, that like, it's like, yes, it's like, it's similar to you, but it's not actually you. And I feel like the show did it. Like, I feel like the show did it. I'm not explaining it great, and I wish I had a very clear example top of mind, but
well, you know. I mean, I get what you're saying, because when Steel, like, they ask him to stay at the end, and he's like, I want to, but I can't, because every time I look at, he's talking to Lois, he's like, every time I look at you, I see my wife, but like, I know you're not her.
Yes.
But you still look like her, and like, it's too weird for me. You know what I mean? Like, so I get what you're saying, yeah, because I go back to thinking about like Flash. Like, I feel like there were episodes where they're like, yeah, well, but that's me. You can't do it. You know? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That sort of thing. So I thought they did a good job with that. And yeah, it was so cool to get the reveal. And I mean, again, I think Kyle Cushing was like MVP number 2, but MVP number 1 of season 1 of Superman and Lois for me was John Henry Irons. And so much of it came down to that, the Battle of Metropolis, when Lois is about to get fried by Leslie Larr, and John Henry is, you know, fighting in the park, and he throws that hammer, and it goes by the guy he's fighting. He's like, you missed. And it clocks Leslie Larr, and he comes back to him, and he goes, I never miss. Oh, yeah. That was the best. That was the best.
So good. I know. Chills me. Like you was like, yeah. Like, yeah. It was so sick, dude.
Yeah. And you know, even before that, when you know, when Clark is fighting off the influence of Zod, and if listeners, you know, I know we're giving some context, but I know we're not like doing full plot summaries here. I'm kind of hoping that you've watched the season. So if anything kind of seems like, what are they talking about? Look, hopefully by this point, an hour in, you've gotten that we really recommend this show. So go watch it. But you know, when John Henry goes in basically to kill Superman, right? You know, we've had the plea from Lois, we've had the plea from Jonathan, but he's going in really thinking he needs to put Superman down to save everyone from his power.
For context, Clark is like, his mind is taken over by the spirit of General Zod, which I want to get into this after, because I think this is the weakest part of the show. But yeah, so basically Steele's going into because he thinks Clark has been irrevocably corrupted and is now a villain and is going to destroy the planet unless he kills him. Like that's what.
Yeah.
So
And then, he finally has this moment where, again, all along it's been Kal-El or Superman. And then finally, like, he addresses him as Clark and tells him to fight. And, ultimately it's the memory of, Clark's family, right, that is able to enable him to fight off the influence. But, I like to think the John Henry Irons, rooting for him in his corner and giving him that time, made all the difference. So again, just his arc over the season was just tremendous. And, of course the season ends with Natalie, his daughter from the other Earth, showing up. And so I'm really, really curious to see how that's going to play out in season 2. But man, what an unexpected and pleasant surprise that Captain Luthor turned out to be, because like we've had so many Lexes. We've had one live action John Henry Irons.
Fantastic John Henry Irons. But this was a different take that like we talked about in our Steel episode, is that the 97 movie, as like, lighthearted and like, kind of corny as it is, it still follows the story of the comic books very faithfully. Where this was, it kind of like inverted the story and like changed it, but kept the core tenets of the character, if that makes sense,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, right. Exactly. Yes. Again, I think like the way he's inspired by Superman is completely turned on its head, but yeah, I think the rest of it, the core, is very similar. I mean, again,
he's a weapons manufacturer, like in the military, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the changes that they made, worked for the story that they're telling, right? So instead of a niece, Natasha, right, it's a daughter, Natalie, with his Earth's version of Lois Lane, which again opens up, a lot of drama. And as far as Natalie specifically, really, really gave us, I thought, one of the most sadly, relatable and very human episodes where, Lois is in therapy, right? That's our framing device for the episode. And over the course of it, we find out that she had been pregnant again after the boys were born and suffered a miscarriage, but they were going to name the daughter Natalie. And so, all of that is kind of going on, for Lois as well. And going back to what you were saying at the beginning about these moments where like Clark is very believably like a person, that's the episode where Jonathan goes into John Henry Irons' RV and he gets trapped and the weapons are going to fry him and Clark has to swoop in at the last second and save him. And Lois just unloads on him, like just yells at Jonathan right, in the kitchen. And she sends Jonathan to his room, and like Clark in that moment, the most powerful man on earth, the powers of a god, he's afraid. He's very, he knows like Lois is really on edge. He knows she's really fired up. He knows that there's more, there's more to it. But just, I so love the way he played that, where it was like, he was like really, taking like these baby steps and like really walking on eggshells around her. And it just, again, like, especially now watching it like as a married man, it's like, yeah, that tracks.
Sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Totally makes sense. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Elizabeth Bitsy Tulloch as Lois?
Oh, I really like her as Lois Lane. I think she's definitely one of my favorites. Like going back to talking about Tyler Hoechlin, like I think she's I don't know how I'd rank them because I didn't put too much thought into that. But like, I mean, it's still really like Erica Durance from Smallville. She might be. I feel like it's between her and Erica Durance for my number one spot, tied for Lois. Because again, she's believably tough to me as a reporter, but still comes off as like sweet and endearing, and you see why Superman's in love with her, right? Like and you can see her as like a good mom too. Like you see her as like to me, like there's so many of those interactions with the kids where it's like, oh, this feels like me talking to my mom. Like these are like interactions I've had with my mom, like straight up. And I was never fully on board with the Snyder
Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, Lois Lane. Like I never like her tough reporter never felt very true to me. Like it felt kind of like act. I mean, it's hard. Acting's hard, right? Not everyone can do it. So like, but Elizabeth Tulloch, I think like she just felt so believable. And to me, she looks like she has the dark hair, like she has the comic book look of like Lois that we haven't seen in like forever. You know what I mean? Like I think the last time we've seen that was Terry Hatcher, I think, was the last one that had like the classic like dark haired comic book like look for Lois. So like I felt like it was a very good portrayal, you know?
Yeah. I mean, she so grew on me. Again, with both of them, like I was a little bit mixed going in, and both of them really won me over. Hecklin first, like I very quickly was like, oh, okay. Like I love the way he's playing this version of Clark as the dad and a little older and all that. So I was really on board with him. It took a little bit longer for her, but you know what? What really kind of put it all into place for me was the flashback episode. Where we get to see how they first met and all of that, because, you know, for so much of this, you know, we see her in mom mode and trying to figure out what's going on with Morgan Edge, and, you know, things get very fraught and, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, there are light moments, but there's a lot of seriousness, and going back and seeing the earlier version of her Lois, and those like more romantic early moments with her and Clark, I was like, oh, like I just appreciated her generally even more. And it made me appreciate everything else that she was doing as well. So yeah, you know, it's so weird because I was really cold on both of them coming into this, but at least as far as her and how I would rank the Loises, honestly, like Erica Durance and Terry Hatcher and Bitsy Tulloch are really in the top tier for me.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I like personally, I like Bitsy Tulloch more than Terry Hatcher. Like, just because, like, I just feel like it's just a more real performance. You know what I mean? I mean, that's era of television though too. You know, it's like they were making a completely different show. So
true. Again, I'll have a better answer once I've done my actual Lois and Clark rewatch. But for now, I would really put the three of them there. And like Amy Adams, I thought she was a good Lois. I didn't think she was a great Lois. I didn't think she was bad. Like I thought
I thought she was kind of miscast a little bit. I mean, like that's just. I mean, she's a great actress, and I've seen her and stuff where she's amazing. I just didn't. For me, it just didn't fit super well. Like I didn't think they had like great chemistry together. But I don't know. Maybe someone else thinks differently.
No, fair enough. While we're talking about Clark and Lois, there was one of the scenes where it's one of the early episodes where Lois wants Clark to go to like another town hall type meeting and kind of make the case against Morgan Edge, and he misses it because of his super heroics. And they have like this is the episode where she goes out drinking with Lana.
Yeah,
and they have this little argument like in the hallway, and it just kind of reminded you know, my wife and I have a great relationship. Thankfully, we don't argue a lot, but when we do, the way they argued was like very similar to kind of how we will express ourselves when there's a disagreement, where I think we both have a self-awareness and we're always like, how do I put this? It's like, we always try to be mindful of like acknowledging the other person. And I think that's what Lois does in that scene where she's like, I'm mad, but like, I know it's not fair to be mad. Like I know you had to go, but I still feel this way and I need to go get a drink. And like with Lana, and I don't know, like just the way that the two of them interacted with each other, again, for me, at least personally, like it really hit home, because it just kind of showed like even, and I guess this is a theme, we've hit on this a few times now, like even when there's anger or upset or whatever the case may be, that there's still this bedrock of love and trust and respect, right? But it's like you still feel a certain way in the moment. I thought they played that great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They have great chemistry together for sure. And like you totally buy them as like a married couple, and you buy them as parents too. And as her as the reporter, which is very important that part feels like you believe that. You believe her as this like tough as nails, not going to take shit from anybody, like stands up to like everyone, stands up to her dad. Like she has this like confidence about her that is so real, you know? And like, I'm 100% down with her as Lois. She's great.
And, you know, going back to that, because, you know, right on this podcast, we talked a lot about the tellings of the origin, and I wanted to spend a little time, and it's only one episode, but it's a key episode. And basically we get another telling of the Superman story. And, you know, I wanted to get your thoughts on it generally, but while we're talking about Clark and Lois, I mean, I love that And of course, we find out that we're seeing all of these memories because Morgan Edge and we still haven't even gotten to Morgan Edge. We'll talk about him, but he's infiltrated Clark's mind. And so he's wading through Clark's memories. But we don't know that initially. We're getting a flashback episode, but we get to see the beginnings of the relationship with Clark and Lois. And we had gotten some pieces of it in the pilot. But then we really got to spend a lot more time in that era with them. And I so loved that, she was smitten with Clark and not Superman. But what I also loved, and I appreciated this more upon rewatch, was that as a reporter, she was not all about getting the Superman story. And I can't think, can you, are there other, I don't know that there have been other instances of this where her whole thing in that flashback episode is everyone's climbing all over each other to get these stories on Superman and he's taking up the front page, but there's this other stuff that's happening, like stories, the hate crimes, right, that she's reporting on, and she's trying to get some traction, but it keeps getting bumped because everyone's covering Superman. I thought that was such a fresh take on this. What do you think?
Agreed. Totally agreed. They've rebooted these things so many times, right? That you have to change things up. And I, like you said, it just brought a freshness to it. You know what I mean? And again, it makes, I like it when she's not infatuated with Superman. You know what I mean? And that just adds to the fact that she's not she's not chasing Superman at all. You know what I mean? She likes Clark and Clark likes her, and there's no the Superman element is almost like a backdrop. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And see, we'll talk about this more when we get to the Donner movie, but you're able to do that when your Clark Kent has integrity. When, he's a little dorky, right? And maybe he wears a tie when he shouldn't. Although I still never quite got that whole bit where she's like, who told you to wear a tie? It's I don't know. It's his first day at a major newspaper. I might wear a tie too.
That leans into his dorky factor though, because he wears a tie, but he's not wearing a suit. You know what I mean? He's wearing jeans with a tie. And that's perfect. The way that they brought about his dorkiness is he's not super fashionable. He's not up with current styles and stuff. I just thought that was great. You know what I mean? I loved it.
Well, and kind of building off of that, they have this great scene where it's the two of them working late at night, right? Because, when she expresses to him, look, I'm trying to cover this story, but it keeps getting, overshadowed by the Superman coverage. Clark's response is, how can I help? Right. And then they start working together on these stories, and then they're late in the office alone one night. And I love just the physicality of it. He gets up, they're both sitting on the desk, and he gets up, and she kind of slinks off the desk. There's this little move that she does, and she kind of asks oh, you got a hot date? And he's like, no, I could probably just go home and heat up some chicken nuggets and watch Seinfeld. And I said to myself, again, as far as the relatability, it's that's probably so 1,000%. That's what he's gonna do. Yeah. It's where else? But that's the thing. It's where else do you get these moments? It was so good, and such a. I also love too, then subsequent to that, when she's interviewing Superman and, they have to take a break, and she confesses to her friend, who we've never seen before or since, her best friend, that, she's in love with Clark. And of course, Superman can hear that. And, what were your other thoughts on the way they laid out the origin in that episode? Because there's some things that are consistent with what we've seen before, but other deviations. What were your overall impressions?
I mean, I like that whole episode a lot. I'm kind of foggy on the details of it. I like that he was stopping the hate crimes. I thought that was very topical and very poignant. I'm trying to think. Again, my biggest memory though is just the suit, the Golden Age suit, being this actually looks pretty good. I still didn't like the underwear, but the rest of it, I'm this looks pretty good. But yeah, the whole them, their interactions, and I do like that. In that interview when Lois is interviewing Superman on TV, and her best friend that we never see before or after is I think Superman's checking you out, and she's like, no, he's not. And she's like, it doesn't matter. I'm in love with. I like that it's she falls for Clark and not Superman. I know we said that before, but I think that's very key to this whole show, is that Clark, being how we always say Clark is who he is, and Superman is what he does, and yeah.
Well, and it's again, it comes out in the dorkiness, but little things too, this line comes up a few times. The kids say it about him, and Clark says it himself. Like, he genuinely loved growing up in Smallville, which, it's funny. Like, you take the 10-year Smallville show. I don't know that I could say, like, yeah, they really demonstrate that Clark loves the town. I don't know. I guess he protects it, certainly, but like, you get this sense like this Clark really loves being part of this community. And kind of on that note, and as far as, sort of, deviations, in so many tellings, of course, Pa Kent tends to get the lion's share of the advice and the poignant moments and his passing.
He's not in this at all. He's got that one brief clip in the beginning, and then that's it.
Yeah, which I thought, it really gave a lot more to Martha and really spoke to, again, her place in, in terms of the relationship with Clark and that period of time after Pa passes. But then also just her role in the community. And, that's more, we hear about it, not necessarily seeing it, but, I like that. Like, Martha oftentimes like doesn't have a ton to do. And so I thought it was, I really liked that aspect of it. I'm a little bit mixed on this, but overall I'm okay with how they handled it. Like Superman the movie, when Clark leaves Smallville on this show, he spends years training with Jor-El at the fortress, right?
I did feel like it was a little weird that when he leaves, he's like 15 or whatever. Like the kid who was playing him I felt like way too young to be like, like when Clark's like, I'm leaving, it's like, you still have like 3 years of high school left, dude. Like I know that was a little weird, but
yes. But that was kind of one of the things that was interesting, both with young Clark as well as with John and Jordan. Like, they cast kids, or at least people who really look like kids. Which,
true,
again, very rare for a CW show. I mean, I wonder if in part they had to do that so that it's more believable that they could be their parents.
Yeah, no, that's definitely why they did it, because if they casted people like Tom Welling as their parents, it would be very strange. But there's no difference between them and
Yeah. But the thing I was going to say was that, again, we'll get into this more when we get to Superman the movie, but probably the thing that bugs me most about that movie is the 15-year programming session that he has with Jor-El at the fortress. And when he's done, he's Superman. And they do kind of basically a version of that here, and again, it's like, I so appreciated this. When he's done training, Jor-El says to him, like, okay, but you still haven't answered the question why you want to help people, why you want to do this. You need to go back into the world and engage with the world first. And that's the thing that is not there in Superman the movie, and that it's hard for me to like really latch on to that version, in part because of that. And so I really appreciated that. I will also say, on a completely a much lighter note, when he returns to Smallville, he looks up Lana, right, and he finds her outside the movie theater. And Friday Night Lights is playing. Boy, that made me feel old.
Yeah. No, totally. I love that they did that though, because it was a period accurate, like, but yeah, dude, it was like, oh yeah, I'm old now. I was in high school when that movie came out. Like it's totally fits the timeline 100%,
Yeah. And I know you said before, and I think that, and the producers have cited this as an influence, and you totally see it, in terms of the way the show is shot in particular. Shades of Friday Night Lights. Did you watch the show or no?
Yeah, I did.
You did, yeah. Same.
I love that show. Yeah.
Same here, and it was great.
Yeah.
They also cited, and Greg Berlanti, the Uber producer, they created Everwood. Did you ever watch that on the WB?
Never saw Everwood. No.
Beautiful show, and actually the kid who played the son on Everwood, it was Gregory Smith, who now has become a director. He directed a number of the Superman and Lois episodes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that was cool. Yeah, as far as the directors, so Gregory Smith directed a number of them. Tom Cavanaugh, who played Thawne, Reverse Flash on Flash, directed the finale. David Ramsey, who played Diggle, he directed the Man of Steel episode.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so cool. And
that's cool.
Coming up in season 2, it was announced that Amy Jo Johnson, the Pink Ranger from Power Rangers, directed an episode.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very cool.
I know, it's good stuff. Now, all right, let's get to what I gather was your least favorite part of this, the Morgan Edge of it all. So
Okay,
what do you
so
think about that?
not so much Morgan Edge per se, but the macro plot of the show is the thing that I think was the weakest part, which is the I don't even want to say the plot of the whole show. Basically, when you find out that Morgan Edge is really Superman's long lost half brother, which is his mom was with Morgan Edge's dad before, like she was married to Morgan Edge's dad, or she was having an affair with Morgan Edge's dad before she met Jor-El, and she left Morgan Edge's dad for Jor-El. Right? That's what they
Well,
said.
well, they say that
Something
she
along those
was.
lines.
They say, see, it was and if anyone out there, if you have a more definitive answer, reach out to me. I felt like they were kind of nebulous in the way they phrased it. They said a couple of times that she was genetically matched with Zeta Rho,
Okay.
which I took to mean that there wasn't a physical relationship, but rather their genetic material was used to produce this son, just like in, various iterations of Krypton and different depictions, right?
Okay.
That's how children were bred. Um, I don't know. I mean, but it definitely was the case that the relationship with Zeta came first, and then
Yeah.
she,
And she left that
yeah,
for Jor-El, right? And so
yeah.
they add this wrinkle to the Superman story that he's got this half brother who has been posing as Morgan Edge and who's on Earth. Cool. I'm on board with all of it. Adding a new villain, I'm always down for all that stuff, right? The part that I butted up against and got kind of bored with was this notion of like we need to resurrect Krypton and conquer Earth and make it Krypton because we've seen it in Man of Steel, we've seen it in the comic books, like in the 15 years I've been reading comics, feel like I've read it like 3 different times. It's it was in the Jeff Johns run, it's twice in the Jeff Johns. It was in the Last Sun. It was in the New Krypton stuff. It's just this like I'm just kind of sick of like, oh, Superman fights off a bunch of Kryptonians that are trying to take over Earth, and it's like and but this was like so close to Man of Steel where it was like we're taking we're taking the souls of Kryptonians that are in the Eradicator, and we're going to replace humans' brains with the souls of Kryptonians, which they inexplicably get powers, which doesn't make sense to me because their biology is still the humans. So when they get the Kryptonian powers, makes no fucking sense.
Well,
But
that was the ex Kryptonite.
yeah, but again, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like I thought the ex Kryptonite was what allowed their consciousness to go in, not. Okay, I mean, still, it was a stretch. It was by far the weakest part of the show. We've been raving about everything on the show, and like I said, the actor who played Morgan Edge was okay. Like I didn't really have like I actually thought he did a pretty good job with what he was given. I just thought that plot was like super weak, and like I was just kind of like, eh. Like once we got into that last like 4 or 5 episodes or whatever, like all the parts that had to deal with the Kryptonians, I was like, it's kind of whatever. I don't know. What were your thoughts on it?
I don't think I was as cold on it as you were, but I don't entirely disagree. And I think this kind of speaks to a larger idea about the show. And I'm going to spin this into a compliment about the show. I think that the family storylines and the storylines about the town and the parenting, all of that, I
Mm-hmm.
feel was so strong that like maybe this paled in comparison. Like it's funny because I looked at like the show up on IMDb before we recorded, like the trivia and the reviews, like just for a little extra context before we recorded. And a lot of the reviews were really positive, but there were a number of reviews who were like, "Oh, it's too light on the Superman and too light on the action and all that stuff." And it's like watching it. There was. I feel like it was episode 3. It was one of the really early episodes where there's almost no Superman action. It's the one where he stops the bridge collapse at the very beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
then I think he rescues Lois at the end when she's being attacked. But like that's
Yeah.
it. And I remember watching that episode, and I'm like, there was next to no Superman in this episode, and I didn't miss it. It's like I'm genuinely invested in Lois and Clark as parents, as Lois as the reporter at the Gazette, at the kids in high school. Like I'm there for all of that. So I think those aspects of the show were the best. And you know what's funny too? I know I'm kind of taking us on a little tangent here, but the visuals, right? What were your thoughts on the effects of the show generally?
So I'll spin this into like what you're talking about with the action is that I think the action is actually really important. Like I do think that was an important part of the show. and I I I liked all the action. Like just because like I didn't like I thought all the fight scenes were great. Talking about the visuals of it, I thought with a TV budget that they had, it looked friggin' great. Like the fight scenes were cool. They were all of the fight scenes were creative too, which I thought usually with Superman you can fall into this trap of them just like throwing each other through walls, but like they had really cool different choreography with each fight, which was great. And I think that's like the idea of bringing back the Kryptonians to me is because I feel like it just felt so much like Man of Steel. Like it was like if it was like if they just tweaked a little bit, like if it was his brother like trying to get revenge on Superman, so he wanted to destroy the planet, like instead of just like repopulating it and making a new Krypton, I think it was just like we literally just did this in Man of Steel, like literally like the same exact plot. I think that was more what I was butting up against. But the actual like fights I thought were very cool. Like the visuals of Steel look friggin' great. Like and all that was CGI, you know? So I mean, I thought the action was well handled for a TV show.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree with that. I agree about the fights for sure. It's funny with the effects generally. I think there were a few sequences along the way that just felt unfinished. The bridge collapse was one of them. There's another one where I think he stops a train where he's running after Kevin Tran. Not Kevin Tran. Yeah. That's the character from Supernatural. Who's the kid?
Oh, the kid yeah. With the broken arm.
Yeah. What was his name on this?
I don't remember. But I don't know who Kevin Tran is either. I didn't get that deep into Supernatural, so.
Okay, yeah, he came later.
But I only got to like season like 4. No, like 6. I think I got to like season 6 on Supernatural.
Gotcha. But so there were a few sequences that kind of felt unfinished, and there were also some where, again, going back to the way the show was filmed and the light that they use and everything, it was very reminiscent of Friday Night Lights, and it had like this very realistic feel, yeah. Like and really gorgeously shot. And I feel like when you got to some of the pure CGI sequences, like when Clark and Morgan Edge have their first real face off, and he reveals himself as Tal-Rho, like that whole bit, that just like it looked different because clearly they were just in front of a green screen. But in any event, I don't say that to take anything away from it. Just that certain instances I think it was a little unfinished, and then other instances it just looks so different from the other scenes in the show. But you know that that is what it is.
I was gonna say anytime that his brother, what was his name, Tal-Rho?
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime he was talking to his father, it looked like Star Trek: The Next Generation a little bit. You know what I mean? Like his like CG like father like visage. Which that guy was crazy looking. Like
yes, yeah, that guy really was. But yeah. So as far as like the Tal-Rho of it all and the plot, yeah, I am with you. Though I'll say this in their defense. I was relieved that the plot wasn't trying to terraform the Earth. Because
I guess like, because that's been done a million times too.
That's been done, and again, of course, in Man of Steel famously. But it's like the thing about that, and I'm sure I said this in another episode. But the thing about that never made sense to me is like, Krypton died. Like, why would you want to replicate the environment of Krypton? This is not a planet that is sustainable.
Where you're going to lose your powers. You're going to lose your powers. Yeah.
So I never quite got that. So I feel like at least they went in a different direction here. I agree with you though. I mean, I think if they had really focused more on Tal-Rho as this cast off son, who was not. Look, Superman's become Earth's greatest champion, and so like I think there might have been some different angles to play as opposed to this whole like possession business, but. I mean, I guess it allowed them, again, to generate the story of, why Morgan Edge would want the town and the townspeople. And it, so, I mean, I feel like it was more of a means to an end.
Like, I liked all that. Like, I liked all the town people. I liked people getting powers, the mystery of all that. Like, I thought all that was great. It was just at the end when it became like, we're going to like rebirth Krypton on Earth. I was like, oh, it's so like I feel like this is kind of like seeing Batman's parents like get killed in the alley at this point. Like it's like we've seen it so many times, And I may be sounding like I'm crapping on it because I just think that the show like was like dealing at 11 the whole time, and that felt like a level like 6 move to make. You know what I mean? Instead of like this such high quality the rest of the show had. So, but nothing's perfect. Making this stuff's hard. I totally get that. So I don't want to be like crapping on them too much.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. And I will, like I've been saying, this whole idea of like the perspectives and everything and seeing where people are coming from. I mean, I did get to a point where I did feel for Tal-Rho. And let me also say, when he first announces himself as Superman's brother, I was like, "Ugh, I don't know if I like this." Like,
I was down with that.
Yeah?
I was down with that. I was like, new character. All right, like it's not Zod. Like I was like so happy it wasn't Zod when he said I was like, oh thank God, because when they showed him in the suit, I'm like, is he General Zod again? Like, and when it was a new character, I was like, oh yes, all right, new character.
Yes, and the other thing about that I think was an interesting choice. Like, yes, it created some variety. They still got Zod in there, right? Zod was the consciousness that was trying to take over Superman, but it's like, all right, I could live with that. It was a little different. But no, so again, initially I was like, oh, I don't know if I like this idea of the brother, but I think it really works because, look, we know Clark is not going to turn on Earth, but it's like, I don't know, if there were anything that might even make him think about it, it might be actual family from Krypton, right? Yeah. So I think that added an interesting angle. And then, I feel like Morgan Edge, or Tal-Rho, like does kind of become a bit of a tragic figure, especially when you see his tutelage under his slug of a father and that whole sequence.
I also loved how like teenage version of him was like he was like really into the Cure. Like I thought that was like such a cool. No, genuinely, I thought that was like a cool take because he would have been in the '80s, and it's like he totally would have looked like that in the '80s, Yeah, it was cool.
But like there's that scene in particular where Tal goes to his father. He's like I have a brother. Like he's here. He's become a hero. Like the people have embraced him. Like he could be my family here. And he's quickly disabused of that notion by his father. But it's like, had he made his own choice in that moment, or if he had not been directed the way he was, it's like, well, his path might have been very different and they could have had that family. And, when we get to that final moment between the two of them in the finale where, Tal is like, I just wanted to be like, I just wanted a family or something like that. Or I just wanted us to be brothers. And it's like, we were like, you could have had that. It's the tragedy of the character. So I think some of the trappings of it were a little, maybe could have been a little stronger. And I agreed, a bit derivative, this whole idea of like, bringing Kryptonians back. But I think ultimately it worked better than I don't know. I thought it would, when they first made this reveal about Morgan Edge. So, and like you said, a new character, like this is at least somewhat of a new, even if his plot, his plan was familiar. It's like, at least it was a kind of a new spin on it.
Yeah. Speaking of their dads, what did you think about Jor-El? Cause like, I think that was like the biggest misfire of the whole thing. Well, this leads me to another question that I want to ask you, which is kind of like a bigger picture for all the Superman media. And Laura and I were talking about this watching it. It's like, why is Jor-El always so like fucking old in these things? Like, shouldn't he look like Superman? Like, shouldn't he be like the same age as Superman? Like, they always make him like in his 60s, but like he should be like really young, no? Like, shouldn't he be like 25 to 30? Because like when he sends Kal-El off, he's a baby. Like shouldn't he be like in the same age bracket as Clark? Like, not like he shouldn't look like his dad now. He should look like his dad like when he was a baby. Like,
I mean, that's I think the iteration that came closest to that was Superman the Animated Series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I guess Bruce Timm probably had a similar thought. He's probably like, why is he always so old?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think just more to, I guess to sort of have that more traditional father-son dynamic where there is that age difference. But I mean, I do think that is a bit of a cheat. I mean, I guess, well, I mean, I don't know if you want to get technical. I mean, look, men in particular, right, have a longer period of time where they could potentially have a biological child. So it's like, it's possible. Also, when you're dealing with Krypton, especially in these versions of the story where it's not a physical conception and birth, right, but it's all artificial, it's like, well, that could potentially happen at any point. And like, I don't know, there are ways you can explain it, but I think ultimately it's to preserve that dynamic when he's having these discussions with the hologram or the voice or the floating head, like whatever it is. But I think your point is good.
It would be a cool twist because like to have like a version of the Superman where like his dad that he's talking to is like younger than him.
Yeah.
right? Especially for this show because he's the son of like teenagers now, right? And like Jor-El was the father of an infant, so like that would be that. I feel like they should have done something like that. That would have been like a cool twist on it, you know? Where like
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's really apparent in the movie, in the Superman the movie, where like Brando is like 70 or something. He's got like shock white hair, and and Lara is like 25. Like it's so funny, but
I mean, I feel like, I mean, Russell Crowe in Man of Steel, they didn't make him look so
no,
old. I
no,
mean,
no,
that
no.
was,
Yeah, he was. That was like more believable for sure.
yeah, they
But
were,
yeah, but the guy in the show though is like not. I, again, I don't want to like. I don't know how to say.
well, I'll
He's
say it if
not.
you want.
He's not how I picture Jor-El. Like let's put that. Even like his mannerisms, like how he acted, he seemed like really mean and angry, and like not very like fatherly. You know.
All right, interesting you say that. So, I mean, yes, I don't feel like he had, I don't know, how do I put this? Like I didn't feel like he really had the gravitas of Jor-El, which
Mm.
I would have been okay to not have that if there was more of the warmth and really like that paternal energy. And I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
totally getting that from him. So I think this might have been a little bit of a miscast. And also too, it's like in fact, I kind of feel bad to like dump on this actor. It's like we've had Marlon Brando, Russell Crowe as like the greatest actors. So it's like it's kind of tough to be compared. But like when we get to the finale, and this was one of the other scenes that made me tear up a little bit when they have the burial for the Jor-El crystal out in the field, and Clark has this speech, and sort of my somewhat of a criticism is that from what we saw, I don't know that this totally tracks, but I'll go with it. And what moved me is when Clark talks about how he like Jor-El taught me so much and about my powers and where I come from, but like the most important thing he did for me was he was just my dad. And I thought that was very powerful. Again, from based on what we saw, it's like, all right, I'll take your word for it. I don't know that I really
Yeah.
felt that, but I did like the sentiment behind it and the fact that the family, was there for him in that moment. I thought that was cool.
Okay, so fun fact about that actor who plays Jor-El. I looked him up because there's something familiar about him. Okay, and I don't know who, if anybody else listening to this, is gonna like find this interesting. Do you remember a movie called Warriors of Virtue?
No, I
They were
can't
like
say that I do.
kangaroos. Okay, so it was a mid '90s like movie that was like obviously a riff on Ninja Turtles. And it was like this kid finds this magic book and he gets sucked into this like fantasy world that's like a very medieval kind of world, and like these giant humanoid kangaroos like protect the world, and it's like guys in suits and they're doing like karate, and like I loved it as a kid. Like, and they were all based on the element. Like one kangaroo had the fire whip, one had like a water sword, like all that, right? The guy who played Jor-El was the villain of this movie, and he played like this like psychopath like samurai that like fought these like kangaroos. And like I'm like, and like it was just like a like I hadn't seen this movie since I was in fifth grade, and I was like looking, I'm like, where's this guy from? And I looked up and I was like, oh my god, it's the bad guy from Warriors of Virtue. If anybody remembers this movie, leave it in the comments on Instagram and tag me, because like that movie was great, at least from what I remembered as a kid. I mean, I don't know how well it holds up, probably not that great, but on a rewatch. But yeah, I'm surprised you didn't know it, because it was like in that vein of like power. It was live. It was all live action, so it was like in that vein of like Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers. I'm surprised as a
Yeah,
fellow '90s kid.
I know I dropped the ball. I'll have to look it up after. But yeah, no, that it doesn't ring any bells. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I don't know what haven't we gotten to about Superman and Lois that you wanted to talk about?
Okay. Uh, I mean, his kids. We didn't mention his kids. Well, I think again, potential to be really annoying and really bad, but they were both excellent. Like both their storylines, you felt for them. They were relatable. Like, you know what I mean. Like made me think back to when I was in high school. Like they played it so like earnestly. Like they didn't go for like the big over the top like CW drama kind of like version of high school. They went for like a very like, I mean, from my experience, something that felt very real. You know.
Yeah, I thought the actors and the way they were written were really really great. It's funny because you watch the show and I think for myself, at least, and probably a lot of people, you're waiting kind of for the other shoe to drop, i.e. you're waiting for John's powers to kick in at some point, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's a card they have to play at any point in the series, and I wouldn't be surprised if and when that happens. But at the same time, I really like this
He
dynamic.
doesn't.
And
Yeah, I do
and
too.
it's like I love how resourceful he is. And you know what? I don't know. I might have to bump Kyle Cushing because I really feel like John Kent was really maybe MVP number 2. I might have to bump Kyle Cushing down because like John
Yeah.
has all these moments throughout where again he doesn't have the power but he's got the heart. This kid's all
Mhm.
heart.
Yeah.
Honestly, man, like he stands up to Sam Lane, calls him a coward.
Yeah.
But even that though, right? Sam Lane has his own journey in that very episode. Lois tells him off, John tells him off, but then he sticks around and he saves them from the possessed
Yep.
townspeople who come to the farm. So props to. Oh, I have one more thing to say about Sam. I'll circle back to, but
Yeah, I do too. I've got more to say about him too. So.
okay, cool. But so he has his moment with him, like we talked about. He makes this plea to John Henry Irons. He's the one. Even though Jordan has the powers, he's the one who motivates and inspires and encourages Jordan to try to use his super hearing to find Clark when he's been taken. So just I don't know. He's got all of the, and again the bond he forms with Lois. And like even though he resents being in Smallville and the fact that so much of what their family is about at the moment revolves around Jordan. Like he's there for his brother. And there's so many moments, especially when Jordan is like first starting to develop this relationship with Sarah. We're like John's always kind of like being that wingman and kind of encouraging.
It's not like they're fighting over her. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which they easily could have done that too. You know what I mean? They could have played that card and like they didn't. And like I like they made him like a good brother. And like later on in the show when that he gets that love interest, the girl who's like the popular girl in school that like she's like she's always like saying hi to him in the hallways and stuff, and he's like all right, yeah, I think she's into me, and he gets this like confidence to go over and like talk to her, and he's like, hey, do you want to like hang out sometime? And she's like, no, and he's like, and you just see him like deflate, and it's like, oh my god, I've been there. Like I feel like it's so relatable, like like,
yeah, and no, yeah, 100%. And again, like the fact that they cast kids, like it really feels, true to life in all of these ways. Yeah, so I really dug all of that stuff. And, Jordan too, like Jordan's, journey through his anxiety to developing the powers to, I know we haven't talked a lot about at all about, the fact that Lois and Clark had kept the secret from the kids. I covered that when we talked about the pilot. So, I figure we could save a little time on that, but, that's really our launching pad here. And, you get to see, this relationship, really, really develop. And I did a whole episode of this podcast about how I was so inspired by the scene in the pilot where Clark is talking to Jordan on the front porch about how, Pa Kent, didn't always know what he was doing, but he was there, and that was enough. And that in part inspired me to get a different job in my own life. So like, there's a lot about the show that resonated. And I don't want to end this episode without saying this, that tying a lot of this together, talk about Morgan Edge, that whole piece. When Clark surrenders to Morgan Edge, right, because he depleted his powers, creating a solar flare to charge up the Eradicator, right, and he doesn't have enough power to fight Edge, and he really, and at that moment he surrenders, he submits. Like, again, talk about those moving moments. It's like, yeah, he would do that. Like he would for his family. And I feel like I've said this in other episodes, but this is the most appropriate time for it. Did you watch any of Supergirl or not? Not really. No.
I didn't see any of it. No.
All right.
I think I saw the first episode.
Okay. I'm going to spoil a little bit of season 2 for you, but in season 2, Mon-El is Kara's love interest for a lot of the season. And long story short, at the end of the season, she basically has to make a choice, and she chooses to send Mon-El away in order to save Earth. That's the short version of it. And Tyler Hoechlin's Clark is in that episode, and he says, Kara is so much stronger than I am. Like, I would not have been able to choose the people of Earth over Lois. And I remember, this was a few years ago now, but I remember saying to myself, like, okay, like maybe that makes Kara stronger or more heroic, depending on your perspective, but it doesn't, it's more interesting to me. Like Clark is more interesting to me because he wouldn't sacrifice these people for anything. Like that's, and this is where I think now as a husband, as a father, like I get this and it's like a hard line in the sand for me where it's like, no, there's a lot that I would sacrifice, but like that's a hard line, like when it comes to them. And that's the same
Yeah.
line that he has. And I really like that.
Yeah. That's well spoken. That's a good Superman moment for sure, and it's a relatable one too. Like you're saying, like yeah.
Yeah. What about Sam? What did you want to say about Sam Lane?
Oh, I thought they did him very well. Like I think that the fact that he was not like a Thunderbolt Ross type that was like an actual antagonist, that he was someone who was on the team, and he felt like a legitimate grandfather, like a good grandfather, like to the kids, and like everything that, and the whole tension with him having kryptonite weapons, I didn't really get, because like Superman gives Batman kryptonite weapons in case he goes bad. So like shouldn't Superman be like, yeah, you should have this shit, like in case I go, like for this exact scenario, you know what I mean? Like, so like I thought everything that Sam did in the show that was shown was justified and like kind of the right thing to do, because like he did need to protect, like it was shown that like if Superman does go back, like there was never a moment where like he was trying to like harness Superman's powers for himself or like manipulate Superman for the government. Like that wasn't shown at all. It was literally him just being like, yeah, I'm watching over the planet and I'm gonna be Superman's like point man to tell him where to go, and I'm gonna be try my best to be the best grandfather I can, And he had a lot of good moments like that where he was like saving the kids and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the things that I found so refreshing about this, because again, in most incarnations, there is a lot of antagonism there, from Sam towards Superman. And, right off the bat in the pilot, you see that they're allies and there's respect there, and
Yeah,
they don't always see eye to eye, but they are generally speaking on the same page. And I was like, oh, like that. I really like
yeah,
this take on it. But like, it also makes sense. I mean, I guess it particularly makes sense when we're dealing with a Sam Lane who knows who Clark is, right? And because now it's like, well, this is also my family. As much as I have this
hmm
responsibility to the world, this is my family. So it all tracked. And it, we keep coming at this. It's like, I feel like every instance where you would expect the show to go a certain way, and where I think most shows and most CW shows would, this show, kind of carves a new path. So like you said, he is a great, you believe him as their grandpa. And I think it's even in that
hmm
first episode where he's saying to Superman, maybe I'll take the boys out fishing. And I feel like it would have been predictable and stereotypical if he really favored Jonathan, right? The
hmm
athletic, outgoing one, and was kind of
yeah,
like, didn't invite Jordan. And Clark was like, well, what if
hmm
Jordan comes to, but that wasn't it. Like he specifically makes a point of saying like, maybe we can even get Jordan to come. I
yeah.
mean, these are like tiny moments, but I think they really, really work.
Yeah, I feel like historically, Sam doesn't want Lois to be with Superman because he thinks Superman's a threat. And in this, it was he didn't want Lois to be with Superman because he knew that if Superman married Lois, he'd have less time to save the planet. And like I thought that was such an interesting take, that it was like, no, he's like not against Superman. He's so pro Superman that he doesn't want his daughter distracting Superman from doing like his Superman duties, which like I thought was, and I was waiting for the whole show for him to have like that villain turn where like the president's like, we have them collared or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I was waiting for that, like and then it never came. I'm so happy it didn't. I hope they don't ever do that. I mean, how many seasons this goes, I'm sure that probably will happen at some point. But like for now, so far, he's a good dude. So I'm liking it as it is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I really, really like their take on him. And he retires at the end of season one, so
Oh yeah,
see
you're right. Yeah, yeah, you're right. He retired. Yeah, so
we'll see where they go. I mean, it's funny, right? Obviously, the show begins with Clark losing his job at the Daily Planet, and that, along with
oh,
Martha's passing, precipitates the move to the farm. But we don't see a lot of Clark farming. I hope we get to see a little bit more of
yeah.
that in season. I want to see him running the farm.
Well, I want to know how they have money, because that was another thing I kept bringing up was that Lois is not doesn't have a job at Daily Planet, and she's working at a place that can't afford to pay her, and Clark is working at the football team, which he says will work for free. So where's their money coming from to like pay like the food bills and electricity bills and stuff? That was one big question. I was like, where's this coming from? Like,
I know. Well, it's like, I know that is a good question, but they make this point of saying that Lois is one of the world's most famous journalists. So presumably, I don't know whether I don't know. I feel like she's done very well, and maybe they have enough saved, or I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, because I was gonna say they also make the point that the lady she's working for is like, I can't afford to pay you, and she's like, it doesn't matter, I'll work for free. And it's like, this is like the most fantastical thing in this whole show is that neither of them have a job that gives them money. Like,
Yes. So we're almost at 2 hours, so I think we should
Okay.
wind down. But there's one big picture question that I wanted to ask you, because it crossed my mind, I think probably during my initial watch and the rewatch. Lana makes a couple of comments about how weird things used to happen in Smallville, and they haven't happened in a long time, right? And this is, I think, again, one of those great examples where we can use the Smallville TV show to fill in the gaps, right, of what you might be talking about. And this is a big question, and maybe the answer is just like, it depends on which story we're talking about. But you look at Superman the movie, and we only spend like 10 or 15 minutes in Smallville, but it's presented as this really like idyllic, calm, quiet place, like this quiet place where Clark grows up and learns good values. You watch the Smallville TV show, and it's meteor freaks and invasions and all sorts of stuff, and it's this gauntlet that Clark has to go through, right? Yeah. And you kind of get the sense, I mean, not so much from the flashbacks, really. We see Clark put on a ski mask and stop a robbery, but but from what Lana's saying, it's like maybe some of the stuff that Tom Welling's Clark dealt with was also, man, who knows?
Yeah.
Like, do you have a version that you prefer? Like when you think big picture about the Superman story and the origin, it's like, should Smallville be the period before the quiet, the calm, where he's just learning good values, or should it be more of this gauntlet that's like really training him to become Superman?
I think reality-wise, it would be the calm thing where he's like maybe stopping like I mean, are there even like bank robbers anymore? Like, I don't even think there are bank robbers. You know what I mean? Like, everything's digital now. Like, it would make, if someone tried to rob a bank, it'd be like, what? Like, so like, we have $10 here, like, but I think that's the reality of it. Of like, if Superman was real, it would be this very quiet, calm, idyllic place. But for purposes of like exciting stories, I like it to be like the gauntlet that like every week he's dealing with, like, this guy turns into a lizard, this guy's like an invisible, this guy, you know what I mean? Like I like that version of it. I like the idea of the Smallville take.
Right on. We've covered a lot. I know we haven't hit on every single nuance or storyline or character, but we've covered a lot. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we sign off here?
Show's really good, and if you haven't seen it yet and you like Superman, you should definitely check it out. Like, it's very, very good.
Yes, for sure. I'll peel back the curtain for a moment. This is going to be the 6th episode of 2022 that Digging for Kryptonite listeners hear, but it's actually the first one that I'm recording, and this is the first one that I've recorded in like over a month. I had a relatively long break from recording, and I missed it. You would think, you would think after doing all those episodes, that I would be happy to have a break, but I honestly missed it, and I was really looking forward to this, and I had this was really a lot of fun, so I thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you, dude. Me too. I had a really, really, we were talking earlier, but I had like this week for me was like super busy and stressful. And I was looking forward so much to like getting on the podcast tonight and talking about this, because it's nice, a fun break for sure. So happy 2022, everyone. Back from 2021.
That's right. And where can people follow you or maybe even get some art from you if they're interested?
Yeah, so you can follow me at V Ken Marion on Instagram and at VK Marion on Twitter. And I'm currently working on Death Shroud right now, which is a super cool comic book that's going to be coming up. We don't have release info yet because I'm not privy to say the release info yet. We want to get the first 5 issues banked first, but I've been putting out little teasers on my socials. So if you want to see art from the hot new comic book property coming up soon, go to my social media feeds, check that out, and follow for release info when we're ready for that. And yeah, if people want to get a commission from me or buy some original art, you can talk to my art rep, Josh Raybuck, and he's of modernmythologycomicart.com. And there's links in my bios for my socials to get there, or you could just Google it. And reach out and check out what's available. And yeah.
Folks, check out V Ken Marion. Ken, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time we have you back on the show, which actually won't be too long from now. So we'll be doing this again before you know it.
Sounds good.
So thank you again to Ken. Thank you to the audience. We'll be back in 1 week with our next all-new episode. Until then, remember, it's about what you do. It's about action.